Welcome to a brand new beginning, you sorry shits!
And we're back. We are back with another gory story of glory from the soon-to-retire Walking Dead series. What a welcome introduction back to the world of The Walking Dead. Honestly, this episode delved out a lot more gore than I was expecting, but it was used quite sparingly and in areas that I think was most deserved. And ultimately, this episode, it did feel like a slow burn. I think they're setting up something bigger. Obviously, we're concluding the flagship series with a war against the Commonwealth. Now, in traditional Walking Dead fashion, we obviously have to start off with a death at the start of a premiere episode, and the fallen victim in this case was a faceless Commonwealth soldier. And honestly, it was in one of the most blink and you'll miss it moments, but it was much deserved, and I can't wait to see the Commonwealth assholes get what's coming to them. We also had a beautiful little intro with, I believe, Judith doing a little voiceover in a montage that talks about the heroes of The Walking Dead and the villains, and ultimately, I think, setting us up for what I hope will be a bit of a tearjerker by the end of this show. Now, if I'm honest, I've spent the past 3 days refreshing my mind over the past season of The Walking Dead, with both parts being played out over the past year, essentially. And honestly, I forgot that Hornsby was being set up to be somewhat of a villain. He was hunting Daryl and Maggie and everybody like that. And that's ultimately the case of this episode. It's almost treated as more of a subplot, though, as the main plot is actually taking place in the Commonwealth. We catch up with Daryl, however, who has gotten the group together with Maggie, Gabe, Aaron, and Negan, and Negan's new partner, Annie, I believe. And Daryl asks that Negan go to the Commonwealth to send a warning and a message to everybody basically from Alexandria that went there: a war is coming, and to make sure that everybody can get out in time before anything starts. And Negan agrees. And honestly, this plays out into some of the best scenes in this episode. Now we cut back to the Commonwealth after this, as there is a growing parade of protests calling for Sebastian's head. If you've forgotten who Sebastian is, this is the bastard of a son to Pamela Milton. Then we cut to Negan, actually inside the walls of the Commonwealth, looking around with a big smile of glee on his face, realising that this is all a lie. And he meets with Jerry and Carol, and they get into their little subplot trying to find Sebastian. Then we cut to a shot of a herd of walkers that are headed to one of the side walls to the Commonwealth that's guarding the entire community. And there's an initiated lockdown, very ironic given the current situation of the world has just come out from. And they're asked that all the residents return to their homes while the soldiers try and deal with this. After a bit of back and forth between Maggie and her group, and then Pamela and kind of what she's dealing with over it, the main point is that Negan and Carol have found Sebastian and are bringing him back to her to try and deal with the situation and hopefully get Hornsby off of Maggie and Aaron's backs, essentially, and save their friends. This could be seen as a bit of a pointless venture and a bit of a pointless exercise to try and help their friends, but they're going to do what they're going to do. They can't actually change anything about this now because the show is written, it's all concluded, it's tied up, ready to go and premiere to the world. But I'm not opposed against it. It seems very much within the wheelhouse of The Walking Dead in terms of its writing style and the way it tries to deal with certain situations in the initial moments. They try and negotiate it. They try and deal with it peacefully until it eventually just breaks out into full war. However, I will say that Negan's interaction with Sebastian was quite funny. One of the highlights of the episode. Honestly, anything with Negan is just an absolute joy to watch. Jeffrey Dean Morgan has honestly become one of my favourite actors that I've ever seen on screen. Then we cut to Pamela's home to kind of tie off the episode, and Sebastian is returned to her, and she basically says, if you didn't do it, then who the fuck did? In reference to why everybody wants his head. Obviously, he's been sending people in to collect fortunes that are inside of a safe after a little side story with him in part 2, where Pamela apparently had restricted all of his financial rights or whatever. So he was trying to keep his lavish lifestyle going elsewhere, and he was killing a load of people for it. Then to round off the episode, we catch up with Mercer and Rosita that have arrived out in the field with two men, for whatever reason, that think they can stop like a whole horde from arriving at the walls of the Commonwealth. And one of them gets killed in quite possibly one of the most gruesome ways I've seen on this show in a bit. And I'm not going to spoil it, because I think it's one that you need to watch if you have the stomach for it. It's actually quite impressive, the practical effects that they did for that moment, but my God, what a death. And left me feeling a little bit sick in my stomach, if I'm perfectly honest. I can't recall another death within the show that I've seen recently that would probably level with that. That was a pretty fucked up one, but I loved it all the same. That's basically it though, guys. That was the episode in its most basic form. That's the simplest way that I could break down the episode. Those are kind of like the key moments of it. Everybody's still positioned very much in the archetypes that they've been built towards now, and there wasn't really much furthered. However, obviously we got a nice bit of gore that I think has been lacking in recent parts of The Walking Dead. And we got to see Negan, and I'm always here for Negan. I'm definitely happy that we got a bit more interaction with him. I was excited to see his interaction with the Commonwealth, and particularly with Mercer, who, as I mentioned, has become one of my favourites. And just to see him finally working with Daryl and the others and kind of adding to that belief that he has changed. So I guess in a sense we got a little bit more progression with Negan and the trust that the group might have in him, as he did them a solid, very small way, but he did them a favour. And we got a little bit more towards Pamela, who essentially is just clinging to the past. She's trying so desperately to renew that rather than look to the future, and it is starting to destroy her world. I just wanted to clarify one very quick thing before I depart. I'm not very well versed when it comes to the Walking Dead comics. I have very limited knowledge on the background for the show, and I know that the comics kept going for a little bit while the show was still running. I'm pretty sure that they're over now, but honestly, my research is very minimal. The only things I am aware of is that the show has deviated completely with the direction of Carl and Rick, and Abraham's death was an inclusion on top of Glenn's death in season 7. Honestly, though, that is about as much as I'm aware of. I've not really wanted to do much research into how the comics did it, because I feel it's going to take away from what the show is trying to do, and it's trying to be very much its own thing. It's within the Walking Dead universe, but you could look at it essentially as an alternate version of the Walking Dead universe that you might know from the comics. And I think it does the show a disservice if you try and compare it, honestly, and I'm just here to enjoy the show for what it is. That's going to do it for this week's episode though, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in. It's been an absolute delight to have you all here and to have your ears for however long this video is going to be once editing is done. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that my thoughts are something that you want to hear, and I still want to hear yours, so definitely let me know in the comments section down below. Are you excited for the final part of The Walking Dead? Are you sad to see it go? Are you ready for it to leave? Let me know. But until next week though, everybody, please remember to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below, as I've said repeatedly, and if you enjoyed this video enough, consider subscribing, because I'm going to be covering the rest of The Walking Dead, and I will even be covering the Daryl, Negan and Rick spin-offs, and I'm already covering She-Hulk. Thankfully there's only 2 more weeks of that bollocks. And I'm covering Star Wars Andor as well, if you have any interest in that. Everything is on Disney+, so it's all in one area if you haven't seen any of it. But if you want my thoughts for both of them and you are watching them, head back and watch them as well. But until then, everyone, like I said, subscribe, like, leave a comment, and I will see you next time. Stay safe.